Am revenit și avem plăcerea la Enterprising for Tomorrow de a-l prezenta pe următorul invitat care va deschide această a doua secțiune a conferinței. Este vorba despre Bruno Dunkel, care este manager general al unui fond de investiții cu sediu la Bruxelles, specializat în investiții sociale și microfinanțare, și astăzi ne va vorbi despre experiența fondului de investiții Inpulse Investment în finanțare responsabilă pentru împuternicirea grupurilor vulnerabile. Bruno Dunkel are o experiență de 24 de ani în finanțarea de tip private equity a cooperativelor din Uniunea Europeană. De asemenea, este membru al Comitetului Executiv COPEST și este implicat în toate provocările de dezvoltare ale acestui vehicul de finanțare socială, operând în Europa Centrală și de Est și deținând în prezent un portofoliu de 38 de milioane de euro în 31 de instituții financiare partenere. Domnule Dunkel, vă ascultăm.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your kind words and introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and dear audience, it's a pleasure for me, and I'm very honored to be today part of this conference and this panel. As I have the honor of opening the panel, actually I would like to start with some kind of first statements, things you might have already heard, but nevertheless I think it's very important to remind everyone of that. So if you allow me, I will share my screen and present you just a few slides. As statements, what I want to say is that we know from the statistics, and these are Eurostat figures, that even before the COVID, quite a significant part of the European population is at risk of poverty or already socially excluded. We also know that the largest part of the enterprises in the EU are micro enterprises. And in terms of employment, those micro and small SMEs, they represent more than 2/3 of the total employment in the EU. So these are important figures to keep in mind. And when we focus more on those micro-entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs, we see that they have more difficulties in accessing tailor-made financial services for different reasons. Lack of collateral, some kind of history that might not be exactly the one expected by the traditional banks, and so on. And therefore, those financial intermediaries specialized in serving and addressing those needs are very crucial. They have a role to play in order to support these micro-entrepreneurs and social enterprises all over the European Union and in Romania. But the question is, does it function well? If we look at some figures, even though the figures you have on the screen are maybe a little bit outdated, we can see that the typical microfinance investment funds, they rather address the large players, and very few actually, and here you can see that only 3% of the microfinance institution with a portfolio of less than 10 million euro represent a part of their portfolio. So it's a very straightforward conclusion. The smaller institutions are less served, and they have themselves difficult access to tailored support when it comes to funding. So we need more dedicated instruments, for sure. And now, 1 year after COVID, a bit more than 1 year after COVID crisis started, all these statements are even more important and more crucial. COVID put a pressure, of course, on liquidity, and first reaction, normal reaction for all microfinance institutions and financial intermediaries dedicated to social enterprises was to support their existing clients. New clients were left apart. The continuity of activity is also something that is more and more at stake. And we see that as we are getting out of the crisis, we might face the next phase of challenges, which is what is going to be the impact of the crisis on the equity level of those financial intermediaries, not just on their liquidity, and therefore on their future. COVID also brought new challenges or put more emphasis on strategical development like digitalization. All these maybe have become common sense, but I think they are useful information to share with you before presenting really who we are at Impulse. Impulse is an investment fund manager. We are based in Brussels, in Belgium. We are specialized in addressing and supporting local financial intermediaries dedicated to microfinance and social enterprises over a region that is covering both the European Union and the I would say the Mediterranean area, so the Middle East and Northern Africa. And of course, when we are talking about the Union, we are also talking about all neighboring countries, Balkans, Caucasus included. We are fully licensed as per the regulation, and we are a team of 14 persons based in 3 different locations. We represent, I would say, what we consider a kind of unique skills and track record assemble. In terms of instruments, because as I will explain to you, we manage debt and equity funds. In terms of geographical coverage, in terms of different types of beneficiaries, microfinance on one side, social enterprises on the other side, and also in terms of expertise when it comes to compliance and regulation. Where we are, well, as I said, this is the region we cover, and we cover it basically and mostly with 3 funds. COPES, that was mentioned as an introduction, is a debt fund. We cover Eastern Europe and Caucasus. Actually, and it's very important that we have today this conference, because it's almost 15 years day per day that we made with COPES our first investment, and that first investment was in Romania, in a Romanian microfinance organization in Transylvania. A few years later, we started the COPMED Fund, which is dedicated to Northern and Africa and Middle East, which is also a debt fund. And more recently, we launched the first equity fund for microfinance and Middle East and social enterprises, which is only dedicated to the European Union and candidate countries, which is the LNOS Fund. So these are the vehicles, the investment vehicles we manage and we support. And maybe to take a little bit more distance and go back to what a typical financial instrument means when we want to target social enterprises and micro entrepreneurs, I think it's good to understand what we call a fund structure. A fund structure is actually itself an intermediary between investors and those who locally do support the social enterprises and micro entrepreneurs. So basically, the funds that we are talking about, they do not take direct interventions into social enterprises and micro entrepreneurs. They do it through local intermediaries. And this is what I call here the type A investment fund. They have a regional action. They do not take direct interventions. They rely on local financial intermediaries because they have the knowledge. They know best their partners and region. Where we have a kind of added value is because we make the connection, thanks to these funds, between investors and local players. And this connection is something that is really key to establish because those investors have difficulties in addressing directly the local players or the final beneficiaries for different reasons. And therefore they need a specialized intermediary. And with regulation that came in between in strengthening the necessity to have everyone a very clear role with clear responsibilities and commitment and also reporting commitments. This kind of intermediation structures have become more and more important. What is important to say about the investors is that we are talking about kind of private-public partnership. And here the key word is blending, is really mixing this public money with private money or leveraging, thanks to public money, on more private money in order to gear more funding into the investment process, targeting ultimately social enterprises and micro entrepreneurs. We also have, I would say, a second type of investment structure, which is directly addressing social enterprises and micro entrepreneurs. They usually are more local or addressing the issues on national level. And you can imagine, or you can find also those more regional funds taking a participation or using this local national investment fund as their own leverage. In terms of instruments, we are talking about debt, equity, guarantees. We will elaborate a little bit more on that afterwards. Those funds, they could be either managed by an external body, and that external body is a partner like we are, Inpulse, or they could be also self-managed when they have their own governance structure. And in such case, we can also, as Inpulse, come as a support to the process, to the investment process. This is a bit of the theory. But it helps hopefully to understand what is a typical funding intermediation structure. I would like also to give some words about what is a good investment story when it comes to social enterprises, microfinance. We need definitely a bunch of clear targets, but it's not just about the target. It's not just about the expertise or the investors, the staff. It's really the combination of all that is important. So what my message is, it is not just one or two or three of them, it's all of them that is needed to make a good story, a good investment story, and a success. So when we are talking about targets, of course, we are talking about social enterprises, youth, more vulnerable populations, SME, microfinance organizations. And when we talk about expertise, it's the track record of the managers, the knowledge of the field, the partnership experience they have with the local players and with their investors. But that's only, I would say, on the investment side. More and more, we need also expertise, as I mentioned, on the tax, financial, and supervision level. And therefore, good command of compliance and regulation expertise is also needed. We have to make sure that we always treat individuals fairly and with dignity, because we are geared by social values. We are ourselves responsible investors, and this responsibility is a commitment towards the partners and their own end clients. So this is something that has to be everywhere, all along the investment cycle, and should be based on transparency and full commitment. The commitment is on the side also of the investors and on the side of the staff. And again, here I want to say that in every good story, people are key. So we are people-centered and we remain people-focused. But if I may just take 1 minute to talk about the investors, I would like to say that when we come to public investors, we see the need more and more of a shift from, I would say, the typical grant paradigm to something which is more investment focused. And to see and to emphasize that when we are talking about investments, especially after COVID crisis, we definitely need more dedicated investment support from the public sector. When it comes to equity support in terms of patient capital, or even capital that is capable to take some first losses, or at least capable to take the first risks on specific issues, and a good combination between the typical public funding support like debt, even equity, and guarantees. This mix would certainly be an important contribution to any new fund that would like to address social enterprises and micro enterprises. Another point that I would like to mention is that when it comes to grants, I mean, grants are needed. They can be very useful, certainly on two levels. One, on the level of providing and ensuring continuity in non-financial support to both microfinance institutions and their clients. This non-financial support is absolutely key. It's not just about finance, it's also about ensuring those partners the capacity to grow, to adapt their strategy, to build on more competences, and to come with the right technical assistance needed. But the grants is also needed on the level of the funds themselves. As we have seen, European Commission provided what they call transaction costs support, which proves to be extremely useful in helping investment funds to target smaller institutions, smaller clients, and make them in a way somehow accessible also in terms of investment targets for investment funds. And we believe, because this is our experience, that this is a very strong instrument also that a public authority can provide. And all this translates into impact. And here, as a conclusion, I would like to just show what Impulse 2020 impact, how it how we can illustrate this impact. We definitely refer to SDGs because this has become international standards. But it's very important for us that behind every objective, behind every indicator, there is a clear link with the reality on the field. So when we are talking about I would say 23% of micro enterprises in agriculture. This is, we can provide this almost name by name. Rural loans, rurality is something that is important. It's about 45% of all the portfolio of all our clients over the different funds. It's something strong. It's something that we would like to increase in the future and get to at least 50%, because we believe that rurality and especially agriculture, sustainable agriculture, is something key for the future of our societies. Poverty is also a very strong, important element. In terms of active clients, all our funds, they represent close to 300,000 clients, which is huge, very important. And there we see that in terms of gender, 50%, close to 50% are women, which is a good thing, but could be better. So something also to improve. I'm not going through all the indicators. It's mostly to say that more and more right now, we are talking about impact. Impact is something key for investors, especially for key public investors, but also private investors. What is behind, very important, is the capacity to translate the performance, the typical social performance of the investment funds into those impact measurements. And therefore, the industry was capable to produce good referentials and good measurement tools, and this is what and therefore we can produce such very striking figures that help to showcase how right and how adapted a tailor-made intermediation in terms of investment fund can work, can demonstrate when it comes to support to social enterprises and microfinance institutions in Europe. Thank you very much.
Mulțumim foarte mult, Bruno Dunkel, pentru această prezentare despre experiența fondului de investiții Inpulse Investment în finanțarea responsabilă pentru împuternicirea grupurilor vulnerabile. Mulțumim foarte mult pentru toate aceste date, așa cum ați arătat acolo, pe lângă poveștile frumoase, sunt foarte importante și datele și aveți foarte multă dreptate. Ne întristează de asemenea să vedem unele dintre cifrele prezentate, să vedem că încă 24,4% din cetățenii Uniunii Europene se află în risc de sărăcie sau excludere socială. Pe de altă parte, vedem cine dezvoltă comunitățile, pentru că 9 din 10 întreprinderi sunt de fapt micro-întreprinderi și dintre ele fac parte și întreprinderile sociale. Iar acestea angajează mai mult de 2/3 din forța de muncă din Uniunea Europeană. Deși avem un sector destul de prezent în piață, nu au, din păcate, aceste micro-întreprinderi și în special cele sociale, nu au la fel de mare prezență în eligibilitatea pentru finanțarea și creditarea disponibilă în piața financiară. Asta ne spune că, într-adevăr, avem nevoie de instrumente financiare mult mai accesibile pentru acest sector atât de mare. Este, practic, o activitate impresionantă, prezentată și ne bucură mult să vedem că accentul în funcționare este pus pe valori sociale, respectul pentru individ, pentru parteneri și clienții lor, oferind astfel împrumuturi care să răspundă provocărilor prezentate pentru fiecare obiectiv de dezvoltare globală, finanțare pentru zone rurale sărace, pentru femei.